Hey, so glad you got here. We were totally waiting for you, just about to listen to a story. Tonight, imagine a cold medieval road winding between dark hills, a ribbon of pale dirt beneath a sky crowded with stars. Somewhere beyond those hills, forgotten ruins sleep under moss and roots. Somewhere, an old secret waits patiently beneath centuries of silence. And somewhere, a man who expected nothing more exciting than a warm meal and dry boots is about to stumble into the sort of trouble that usually belongs in songs sung by overly confident bards. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what the local hour is where you are. It's always fascinating to imagine this tale drifting through different corners of the world. Now settle in, get comfortable, and just relax. Today's tale starts like this. The man was called Ryan, not a knight, not a lord, not a famous adventurer, whose name caused people to spill their ale in surprise. Just Rowan. He made his living traveling between villages carrying letters, small packages, and occasionally gossip disguised as important news. In truth, gossip often paid better. On a gray autumn afternoon, he followed a narrow road through the northern countryside. Wind stirred the yellow grass beside the path, and clouds drifted low enough to seem almost tangled in the distant hills. Rowan's boots were damp, his cloak was damp, his mood was becoming damp as well. The road had been longer than expected, and the village where he planned to sleep seemed determined to remain several hours. Farther away nitrogen monoxide matter how long he walked. If roads could lie, he muttered, this one would be a champion. A nearby crow answered with a harsh caw. Thank you for your support. The crow seemed unimpressed. The countryside stretched around him in rolling waves of farmland and scattered woodland. Here and there stood lonely stone markers so old that nobody remembered, whose original purpose had long been forgotten. A standing stone might once have marked a border, a grave, or a sacred site. Hundreds of years later, people simply called it the stone near the road, and continued using it anyway. Rowan passed one such stone as evening approached. Something caught his eye. At its base sat a small wooden chest, not hidden, not buried, just sitting there, which was immediately suspicious. Nothing valuable ever sat beside a road waiting politely for strangers. He slowed. The chest was old but sturdy, reinforced with iron bands darkened by age. Rowan glanced around. Nitrogen monoxide travelers, nitrogen monoxide wagons, nitrogen monoxide angry. Owner running toward him, shouting accusations. Only wind and grass. Carefully, he approached. Then he waited. Nothing happened. Nitrogen monoxide trap sprang. Nitrogen monoxide bandits emerged. No mysterious wizard appeared to deliver an overly dramatic speech. Rather disappointingly, the world remained quiet. He crouched and examined the chest. The lock had rusted away long ago. Inside rested a few scraps of cloth, several crumbling papers, and what appeared to be a rolled piece of parchment tied with faded blue cord. Rowan lifted it. The parchment felt surprisingly well preserved. He untied the cord. Slowly, the parchment unfurled. Lines spread across its surface. Roads, mountains, rivers, symbols. Many symbols. Some were familiar. Most were not. He studied the drawing. It was clearly a map, But unlike ordinary maps used by merchants or travelers, this one seemed filled with strange markings around its edges. Tiny crowns, stars, circles connected by winding lines. And near the center stood a symbol that immediately drew attention. A golden kingdom had once been painted there. Time had faded the colors, but enough remained to reveal towers, walls, and a crown above them all. Beneath IT appeared several words, written in an older style of script. Rowan squinted. The ink had faded. The letters were difficult to read. After several attempts, he managed to decipher part of the phrase. Kingdom of Arl? The remainder had vanished. Arl? The name stirred a distant memory. Years earlier he had heard an elderly storyteller mention. He rolled the map, halfway closed, then stopped. Something felt odd. The parchment was thicker near one corner. Carefully, he examined IT. There, hidden beneath a fold, lay additional markings almost invisible to the eye. A sequence of symbols, a crescent moon, a tower, 3 hills, and an arrow. For Rowan, IT was practically a profession. The sun drifted lower. Orange light spread across the fields. He considered leaving the map behind. After all, forgotten maps frequently lead to forgotten problems. A sensible man would continue toward the village. A sensible man would eat, stew, sleep, wake, deliver his letters, live peacefully. Unfortunately, Rowan had never possessed an excessive amount of sense. He tucked the parchment into his satchel. Just until I find the owner, he sighed. This statement convinced absolutely nobody, including himself. The crow from earlier landed atop the standing stone. IT stared down at him. You seem judgmental. The crow blinked. Rowan pointed a finger. I blame you for this. The bird flew away without accepting responsibility. Twilight settled over the land. As darkness deepened, Rowan finally reached the village he had been seeking. IT consisted of perhaps 20 cottages clustered around a muddy square. Smoke drifted from chimneys, warm lantern light glowed through small windows. The sight felt wonderfully welcoming after a long day on the road. He secured lodging, found supper, and settled near a hearth. The meal was simple. Bread, stew, cheese. To a weary traveler, IT tasted magnificent. Later, while most villagers chatted quietly around the fire, Rowan removed the map and spread IT across a table. Immediately he noticed something he had missed before. Several routes marked on the parchment nitrogen monoxide longer existed on modern maps. Entire roads had vanished. Forests had changed. Rivers had shifted course. The map appeared ancient, extremely ancient, as shadow fell across the table. Rowan looked up. An elderly villager stood beside him. The man's eyes narrowed at the sight of the parchment. For a long moment neither spoke. Then the old man quietly asked, "Where did you find that?" Rowan felt a small chill, despite the warmth of the fire, along the road. The old man's expression changed. Not surprise, not excitement. Something closer to concern. He lowered himself into a chair. His gaze remained fixed upon the faded image of the crowned city. Finally, he spoke again, and his voice was barely above a whisper. That map should not still exist. The room suddenly seemed much quieter. The fire crackled softly. Wind tapped against the shutters, and Rowan, who only hours earlier had worried about damp boots and a long road, realized he might be holding something far more important than an abandoned piece of parchment. He might be holding the last map to a kingdom the world had forgotten. The old man's words lingered in the air long after he spoke them. That map should not still exist. Rowan stared at him across the table. For a moment neither moved. Around them, villagers continued their conversations, unaware that a forgotten kingdom had just quietly entered the room. The old man finally glanced around before leaning closer. His weathered face carried the look of someone who had spent many years keeping certain thoughts to himself. "Roll IT up," he sighed softly. Rowan obeyed. That seemed wise. Maps rarely inspired such reactions unless they lead to treasure, danger, or taxes. Of the three, taxes were usually considered the worst. The old man rested his hands on the table. "Tell me exactly where you found IT." Rowan described the standing stone and the chest. The villager listened carefully. When the explanation ended, he nodded slowly. "As I feared." "You feared abandoned chests beside roads, nitrogen monoxide." The old man lowered his voice further. "I feared someone had finally found the last route." Rowan felt curiosity pulling harder than ever. The last route to what? The man's eyes shifted toward the satchel. To Arl. The name settled heavily between them. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. Inside, the fire crackled softly. The old villager seemed to debate whether he should continue speaking. At last he sighed. "You know the stories?" "Only fragments. Most people know fragments." The man folded his arms. "Children hear tales of a golden kingdom hidden beyond mountains and forests. Most assume IT never existed." "And you don't?" "No." His answer came immediately. Nitrogen monoxide. Hesitation. Nitrogen monoxide. Doubt. Just certainty. That certainty interested Rowan more than any legend. The old man introduced himself as Edric. He claimed that generations earlier, his family had preserved pieces of ancient history passed from parent to child. Not written histories, spoken ones. The sort of stories people remembered because nobody trusted paper to survive forever. "Arl was real?" Edric sighed. "A kingdom?" "A great one." Rowan listened carefully. According to family tradition, Arl had flourished centuries ago. Its cities prospered. Its roads connected distant lands. Its scholars collected knowledge from every corner of the known world. Then seemingly overnight, IT vanished. Not conquered. Not destroyed. Simply gone. Records disappeared. Maps were altered. References faded from history. Within a few generations, most people believed Arl had been nothing more than a myth. "That doesn't make sense," Rowan sighed. "IT never did." Edric nodded. "That's what makes IT interesting." A nearby villager laughed at some unrelated joke. The cheerful sound felt strangely distant. Rowan unrolled a small portion of the map again. The old man studied IT. His expression grew increasingly troubled. Then he pointed toward a cluster of symbols near the edge. "Those." Rowan looked. 3 hills, a tower, a crescent moon, the same markings he had noticed earlier. "You recognize them?" Edric nodded slowly. "They appear in the old stories." "What do they mean?" "Nitrogen monoxide, one knows." That was disappointing. Ancient clues would be much easier if ancient people occasionally included helpful notes. Something like, "Congratulations, traveler. The hidden kingdom is 3 days north. Bring snacks." History rarely offered such conveniences. Edric continued studying the parchment. The symbols always pointed toward a path. "What kind of path?" "The forgotten road." Rowan raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously dramatic. It is. The old man actually smiled. Ancient legends enjoy drama. That, at least, was true. The conversation stretched late into the evening. Edric revealed every detail he could remember. Most of IT consisted of fragments, scattered references, half-preserved stories, hints rather than answers. Yet certain patterns emerged. Again and again, the stories mentioned specific landmarks: a valley surrounded by steep hills, ancient stone markers, ruined watchtowers, roads abandoned centuries ago. As Rowan listened, excitement slowly replaced caution. The map wasn't merely old. IT appeared to be connected to places that still existed. Real places, reachable places, places marked by clues. Eventually, Edric noticed the expression forming on Rowan's face. No. What? No. I haven't said anything. You don't need to. The old man pointed. You're thinking about following IT. Rowan considered denying this, then decided honesty required less effort. Perhaps, EDR, IC groaned. Of course you are. I travel for a living. You carry letters, sometimes packages. That is not the same thing. Rowan couldn't argue with that. Still, the idea had already rooted itself firmly in his thoughts. A forgotten kingdom, a mysterious map, ancient clues. The opportunity was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, somewhere deep inside his mind, a small, sensible voice suggested this might be a terrible idea. Unfortunately, that particular voice had never been especially influential. The evening ended. Villagers drifted home. The fire burned lower. Eventually, Rowan retired to his room. Sleep should have come easily after a long day. Instead, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Moonlight filtered through the narrow window. The map rested beside him. Its presence felt almost magnetic. Every unanswered question seemed to pull at him. What had happened to Arl? Why had its memory vanished? Who had hidden the map? And perhaps most importantly, why leave it beside a road where anyone might find IT? The mystery deepened rather than faded. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion finally overcame curiosity. He slept. Morning arrived beneath gray clouds. After breakfast, Rowan prepared to leave. Edric met him near the village edge. The old man carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. For the journey, Rowan accepted IT. Inside were dried apples, bread, and cheese. Thank you. You'll need them? That sounded ominous. I haven't decided to follow the map. Edric gave him a look. Yes, you have. FAIR point. Before departing, Rowan asked one final question. If you knew these stories, why never investigate yourself? The old man gazed toward the distant hills. For a long moment he remained silent. Then he answered, because some mysteries are easier to admire from afar. Rowan nodded thoughtfully. A reasonable philosophy, one he was almost certainly about to ignore. The road carried him northward. Fields gradually gave way to woodland. Ancient oaks stretched twisted branches over the path. Leaves drifted through cool autumn air. By midday he paused beside a stream and examined the map again. This time he compared its markings to the landscape. Slowly, patterns emerged. A ridge shown on the parchment matched a line of hills nearby. A river corresponded with the stream before him. The route was becoming clearer, and that realization brought an unexpected feeling. Someone else had used this map. Someone had walked these roads. Someone had hidden IT. The thought lingered. Toward evening, news from neighboring villages, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Yet as the wagon continued past, Rowan noticed something odd. Two riders followed at a distance behind IT. Both wore dark cloaks. Neither looked at the merchant. Instead, they seemed interested in the road itself. More specifically, interested in him. When Rowan glanced their way, one immediately looked elsewhere. The other adjusted his hood. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps not. The riders remained, distant, never approaching, never speaking, just following the same road. A curious fact from medieval travel is that roads often created strange temporary communities. The same travelers might cross paths repeatedly for days without ever formally meeting. Normally, that would have explained everything, yet something felt wrong. The sensation persisted as afternoon faded into evening. At the next crossroads, Rowan deliberately chose an unexpected direction. A side road, narrow, less traveled. The sort of route nitrogen monoxide sensible pursuer would predict. Several minutes later he looked back. The two riders had taken the same turn. The small, sensible voice inside. His head suddenly became very active. Someone else knew about the map, and whoever they were, they had begun following him. Rowan kept walking. That he decided was the best immediate strategy. Running would look guilty. Stopping would invite conversation. Turning around and asking two suspicious riders whether they were suspicious would probably not produce a useful answer. So he walked. The side road narrowed between hedges thick with thorns and pale autumn berries. Branches scraped gently at his cloak as evening settled. The air smelled of wet leaves, cold soil, and the faint wood smoke of farms hidden somewhere beyond the trees. Behind him, hoofbeats followed, not close, not distant enough. Rowan adjusted, the satchel strap across his shoulder. The map seemed suddenly heavier. At the next bend he spotted an old shepherd's track slipping. Away through the hedge, IT was barely visible, more memory than road, but IT led toward rising ground. The map had marked hills nearby, and Edric's stories had mentioned a valley beyond them, a valley nobody crossed. Wonderful. Exactly the sort of place a reasonable man avoided after supper. Rowan waited until the road dipped behind a stand of alder trees. Then he slipped through the hedge and followed the shepherd's track uphill. Thorns tugged at his cloak. Mud grabbed at his boots. A startled hare bolted from the grass, looking deeply offended by his presence. "Apologies," Rowan whispered. "I also dislike surprise visitors." He climbed until the road vanished behind him. Only then did he crouch beneath a leaning ash tree and listen. For a while he heard nothing except wind. Then came distant voices. The riders had reached the bend. One cursed. The other said something too soft to catch. Rowan held his breath. Hooves shifted on the road below. The men searched briefly. Then, after several tense minutes, the hoofbeats continued onward. He exhaled slowly. That was encouraging. Also temporary. He unrolled the map by the last gray light of evening. The parchment showed 3 hills arranged like sleeping animals. Beyond them lay a narrow valley marked with a strange symbol. A hollow circle crossed by a single vertical line. Rowan had nitrogen monoxide idea what IT meant. Ancient mapmakers had a gift for being mysterious at exactly the wrong moments. He followed the track higher. Night came softly. Clouds covered the moon, and the world turned to shades of silver and black. He walked carefully, using his staff to test the ground. Twice he slipped. Once he caught himself by grabbing a shrub that fought back with thorns. By full dark, the hills opened before him. Below lay the valley. It stretched long and narrow between steep slopes, filled with mist that moved like slow water. Dark stones rose from the valley floor at irregular intervals. Some stood upright, others leaned, broken and half-buried. Nitrogen monoxide cottages, nitrogen monoxide fires, nitrogen monoxide road visible. Only mist and stone. Rowan understood immediately why locals avoided IT. The place looked as though the earth had swallowed a secret and was still digesting IT. He descended carefully. The temperature dropped with every step. Moisture gathered on his eyelashes. The air became quiet in an unnatural way, not silent exactly, but muffled, as if sound had been wrapped in wool. Halfway down, he noticed carvings on a stone near the path. They were nearly worn away, spirals, lines, a small crowned shape. He brushed away moss. The crowned shape matched one from the map. His pulse quickened. He was on the right path. That was thrilling. IT was also inconvenient, because the right path led deeper into the valley nobody crossed. At the bottom, mist gathered around his knees. He walked between the standing stones, counting them without knowing why. 7 on the left, 9 on the right. Then one fallen across, the center like a sleeping giant's finger. A curious little truth about medieval landscapes is that people often explained old ruins with stories about giants, devils, saints, or kings, because some people long ago stacked these stones for reasons now lost to you. S was apparently too dull for a proper fireside tale. Rowan stepped over the fallen stone. His boot landed on something hollow. A dull sound echoed beneath him. He froze. Carefully he scraped aside grass and mud. Flat stone. Not natural. A covered channel, perhaps. Or an old road buried under earth. He knelt and cleared more soil. There, carved into the surface, was the crescent moon, the same symbol from the map. Rowan smiled despite himself. Well, he murmured, that's either excellent news or the beginning of a very regrettable legend. He followed the buried stones through the mist. The path curved along the valley floor, invisible unless one already knew to seek IT. Whoever had made the map had marked not roads as they appeared, but roads as they had been. Old roads, lost roads, paths remembered only by stone. After an hour, the mist thickened. Shapes appeared and vanished around him. At times, the standing stones resembled people. At other times, they seemed like watchmen with bowed heads. Then he heard something, a faint clink. Metal against stone. Rowan stopped. He turned slowly. Behind him, far back in the mist, a light flickered. Torchlight. His stomach tightened. The riders had found the shepherd's track, or perhaps they had known of it all along. He moved faster. The buried road led toward the narrowest part of the valley, where cliffs pressed close on either side. The map showed a mark there, but the parchment had faded badly. Rowan could make out only a jagged line and something like a doorway. Behind him, voices echoed strangely through the mist. One man laughed. The sound did not belong in that place. Rowan tucked the map away and hurried. Between 2 tall stones, the ground sloped downward. His boots splashed through shallow water. The air smelled of moss and iron. Ahead, only stone. He pressed his hands against the cold rock. Nitrogen monoxide, crack. Nitrogen monoxide, door. Nitrogen monoxide, helpful. Ancient inscription saying push here. Behind him, torchlight grew brighter. He forced himself to breathe. The map had shown a doorway. The road lead here. There had to be something. There it was. A carving. The hollow circle with the vertical line, the valley symbol. Rowan placed his fingers into the carved groove. The stone shifted. Not much, just enough. A low grinding sound trembled through the cliff. Part of the rock face opened inward, passage black as ink. Rowan stared. Then he glanced back at the approaching light. Naturally, he whispered, the terrifying hole wins. He squeezed through. The stone door began closing behind him with painful slowness. Just before IT sealed, he saw two figures emerge from the mist. One lifted a torch. For the briefest moment, Rowan saw a pale face beneath a dark hood. Then the stone shut. Darkness swallowed everything. Rowan stood in the hidden passage, breathing quietly, one hand pressed against the wall. The valley outside was gone. The riders were gone. Only darkness remained. And somewhere ahead, beneath the hills, the forgotten road continued. Rowan waited in darkness. At first, he heard only his own breathing. Then the stone door behind him gave one final, heavy sigh and settled into place. The sound rolled through the passage like distant thunder. He stood very still. This seemed wise. Ancient hidden doors did not inspire confidence. They had a way of making a man feel like he had just been politely swallowed by a mountain. After several moments, Rowan reached into his satchel and found his small tinderbox. His hands worked slowly. Spark, nothing. Spark, nothing. Spark, a thread of flame. He lit the stub of a travel candle and shielded it with his palm. Weak golden light revealed a narrow passage, carved through bedrock. The walls were smooth in places, rough in others as though generations had widened and older. No handle. Nitrogen monoxide obvious way out. Excellent, he muttered. A road with commitment. He turned forward. The passage sloped downward for perhaps 20 paces before leveling out. Along the walls appeared shallow carvings, almost lost beneath mineral stains. Some showed vines, others showed towers, others formed. Symbols he could not read. Then he noticed something remarkable. Tiny flakes of blue pigment still clung to one carved line. Color. After centuries underground, a curious fact about old wall paintings and carvings is that bright colors often survived in hidden places far better than out under sun and weather. Medieval people loved color more than most surviving ruins admit. Time simply stole the evidence and left everyone thinking the past preferred beige. Rowan moved slowly. The passage opened into a chamber. His candle light touched stone pillars arranged in a half circle. At the center stood a low platform covered in dust. Beyond IT, 3 tunnel mouths waited. Above each entrance was a carved sign. The first showed 3 hills. The second showed a tower. The third showed a crescent moon. Rowan smiled faintly. The map symbols. He unrolled the parchment on the platform. By candlelight, the hidden markings became clearer. The map seemed to align with the chamber itself. 3 hills, tower, crescent moon. A sequence. Perhaps O.R.A. warning. He studied the lines. The path on the parchment passed first through the hills, then toward a tower, and only later beneath the crescent. That suggested the first tunnel. Possibly. Or IT, suggested Ancient. Cartographers enjoyed humiliating future travelers. He chose the entrance marked by 3 hills. The tunnel beyond was lower and older. Routes, they were broad, flat, and laid with astonishing precision. An underground road, not a tunnel for hiding, not a cave for storage. A road. Rowan slowed, awed despite himself. This passage had been made for movement. People had walked here regularly once. Messengers, guards, merchants perhaps. The kingdom of Arl was becoming less like a song and more like stone beneath his feet. The tunnel widened again. Ahead, faint gray light appeared. Rowan extinguished the candle and approached carefully. The passage emerged into a hollow between hills. He pushed aside hanging ivy and stepped out beneath an overcast sky. Morning had arrived. He had spent the night beneath the earth without realizing IT. Before him lay a hidden basin surrounded by slopes. Grass grew tall and silver with dew, scattered across. The basin were low shapes beneath the greenery. Ruins, not dramatic towers, not glorious walls, just foundations, broken steps, fragments of paving, a settlement, houses. Here a small square, here a well now choked with leaves. Near the center stood a circular stone base carved with faded lettering. Rowan brushed lichen from the edge. The script resembled the words on the map. He could not read most of IT, but one name appeared again. Aurel. His skin prickled. The stories were true. This little abandoned place had once belonged to the Lost Kingdom. Perhaps an outpost, perhaps a roadside station, perhaps nothing more than a village along a forgotten route. Yet even its ruins hinted at skill. Drainage channels lined the streets. Stonework fit tightly, despite age. The well had been capped with an intricate carved ring. These people had built carefully. They had expected their work to last, and IT had longer than memory. Rowan searched the ruins for anything useful. In one collapsed building, he found fragments of pottery glazed deep green. In another, a bronze pen shaped like a leaf. He left both where they lay. He was curious, not a grave robber. Mostly, his stomach reminded him that curiosity was not breakfast. He sat on a fallen block and ate bread from Edric's bundle. The bread was hard enough to challenge the dignity of his teeth. Still, hunger improved IT. As he ate, he noticed marks on the paving near his feet. Arrows, not painted, carved, small enough to miss. They pointed toward the northern edge of the basin. Rowan followed them. There, half hidden by thorn bushes, stood another standing stone. This one bore the tower symbol. He cleared branches away and found a narrow path climbing beyond IT. The map had guided him correctly. First the hills, now the tower. He checked behind him. No riders, no torchlight, nitrogen monoxide voices. Yet he could not shake the feeling that the men in dark cloaks would return. People who followed through haunted valleys rarely gave up because of one inconvenient stone door. He climbed the northern path. The ruins disappeared behind him. The slopes beyond were marked by ancient earthworks, raised banks, ditches, and flattened terraces beneath grass. At first they seemed natural, then patterns emerged, defensive lines, old walls of the hills had been shaped. The land itself had been turned into a shield. Arl had not merely been wealthy. IT had been organized, powerful, prepared. That raised troubling questions. Why would such a kingdom vanish? Who could erase something so vast? And why leave only hidden roads behind? By afternoon, the path lead into higher ground, where stones jutted from the soil like broken teeth. Wind moved through dry grass with a whispering sound. Then Rowan saw IT. Far ahead, rising above a fold in the hills, stood the top of a tower. Only the top, gray stone, roofless, weather-worn, lonely, as a candle after the feast is over. The tower marked on the map. He felt a small surge of triumph. Then he saw movement near its base. A figure stood beside the ruin. Not one of the riders. This person wore a brown cloak and leaned on a staff. Old. Waiting. As Rowan approached, the figure lifted a hand. "You're late?" the stranger called. Rowan stopped. Late? Late? That was never a comforting thing to hear from someone standing beside a ruin nitrogen monoxide. One should have known he was seeking. The old figure smiled. "I wondered whether the valley would turn you back." Rowan kept one hand near his knife. "IT nearly did. Good, good, good. Means you were paying attention." The stranger's eyes flicked toward Rowan's satchel. "You carry the map." Rowan said nothing. The old guide nodded as though silence confirmed everything. "Then come along. The easy part is over." Rowan looked at the ruined tower, the lonely hills, and the stranger, who apparently knew far too much. For the second time since finding the parchment, he considered turning back. For the second time, he did not. The old stranger began walking before Rowan agreed to follow. This was irritating. IT is always rude. When mysterious people assume obedience simply because they are mysterious, very efficient. Yes, but rude. Rowan stayed where he was for several heartbeats, watching the figure climb the slope beside the ruined tower. Then, with a sigh, he followed. The stranger moved slowly but confidently, staff tapping against stone. His cloak was patched at the shoulders, his boots worn pale at the toes, and his hair was white enough to suggest he had been arguing with winter for many years, and winter had mostly won. "Who are you?" Rowan asked. "Someone who knows where not to step. That is not a name. IT is more useful than most names." Rowan could not entirely deny this. The old man led him around the tower's base. Up close, the ruin was larger than IT first appeared. Only half its wall remained, rising in a jagged curve against the cloudy sky. The stones were fitted without mortar, each one shaped to grip the next with quiet stubbornness. On the inside wall, almost hidden beneath lichen, Rowan noticed more carvings, lines, stars, a crescent, and a small crowned city. The old man saw him looking. This was a marker tower, he sighed. One of many for Arl, for those who still knew how to reach IT. Rowan turned. "You speak as though people still do." The stranger smiled faintly. "Some paths remember feet. That is poetic. IT is also annoying, I know." At least he was self-aware. The old man finally gave his name as Mayo. He claimed to be a keeper of old paths, which sounded like either a sacred duty or a very lonely hobby. Perhaps both. His family, like Edric's, had preserved fragments of knowledge about Arl, but where Edric's people had kept stories, Mayos had kept roots, secret ways, hidden markers, safe passages through places others avoided. Arl did not vanish by accident, Mail sighed. IT withdrew. Rowan frowned. Kingdoms do not withdraw. Most do not. They reached a sheltered hollow behind the tower. There, beneath a thorn tree, Mail uncovered a flat stone marked with the tower symbol. He pressed his staff into a small hole beside IT. Something clicked. Below ground, a section of turf shifted, revealing a stone-lined pit with steps descending into darkness. Rowan stared. Do all old men in this region have secret doors? Only the interesting ones. That is deeply unsettling. Mail chuckled and began descending. Run followed. His steps lead to a narrow chamber beneath the tower. Unlike the damp passage under the valley, this space was dry. Clay jars lined one wall. Shelves of blackened wood held rolled scraps of parchment sealed inside bone tubes. A hidden archive. Small, but carefully kept. Mail lit an oil lamp. Warm light filled the chamber. Sit, he sighed. Rowan sat on a low stone bench. Mail held out his hand. The map. Rowan hesitated. The old man's expression softened. I will not take IT, but you cannot read IT alone. That, unfortunately, was true. Rowan passed him the parchment. Mail unrolled it with reverence. For several moments, he said nothing. His face changed as he studied the faded lines. Sadness, recognition, fear. Finally, he touched the golden mark near the center. This is nitrogen monoxide copy. You can tell? Yes. How? Mail pointed to the map's edge. There, the ink was mixed with powdered lapis. Rowan blinked. Blue stone? Rare. Costly. Used for sacred manuscripts, royal seals, and things someone wanted to outlast ordinary memory. A curious little fact. In the medieval world, deep blue pigment could be more valuable than gold on gold when made from true lapis lazuli. Imagine paying a fortune just to color a robe in a painting, then still having some monk complain the shade was not dramatic enough. Mail tilted the parchment toward the lamp. Under the warm glow, hidden lines appeared, not ink, pressure marks, tiny grooves scratched into the surface. The map contained another map beneath the visible one. Rowan leaned closer. Well, that's inconvenient. No, Mail sighed. That's deliberate. He traced the hidden route with one finger. The visible path leads travelers to ruins. The pressed path leads beyond them. To Arl? Perhaps, 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 leads travelers to ruins. The pressed path leads beyond them. To Arl? Perhaps, 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 with one finger, Mail looked up. No living keeper has reached the final city. That dimmed Rowan's excitement. But you know the way? I know pieces of IT. Wonderful. Nothing inspires confidence like pieces. Mail ignored him and continued reading. The next stage would lead north and east across lowlands now, swallowed by marsh. The map marked old causeways hidden beneath reeds, abandoned shrines, and a boundary stone called the Huron's Tooth. Rowan had never heard of it. Mail had. The marshes are dangerous, he sighed, naturally. Fog changes distance. Water hides sinkholes. Reeds conceal channels deep enough to drown a horse. Anything pleasant? Frogs. Good, I was worried. Mail rolled the parchment halfway and studied Rowan carefully. Why do you seek Arl? The question felt heavier than expected. Rowan almost answered with a joke. For treasure, for curiosity, because mysterious maps have a way of bullying men into poor decisions, but none felt entirely true. He thought of the abandoned village in the hidden basin, the carved streets, the careful stones, the sense of a whole people buried beneath silence. I want to know why IT disappeared. That answer may not comfort you. Most true answers don't. The old keeper seemed to approve. He returned the map. Then listen well. Auril was not merely lost. IT was hidden from those who hunted IT. Rowan's attention sharpened. The riders? Perhaps servants of the same hunger. What hunger? Mael's face hardened. The belief that every hidden thing must be possessed. Silence settled in the chamber. Above them, wind brushed the ruined tower. Mael explained that stories of Auril had always attracted seekers. Kings who wanted its wealth, scholars who wanted its archives, priests who feared its knowledge, thieves who naturally skipped the complicated reasons and preferred shiny objects. Most found nothing. Some vanished. A few returned changed, refusing to speak. The map was made for one purpose, Mael sighed. Not to reveal Auril, but to judge whether a traveler should reach IT. Rowan looked down at the parchment. The idea was not comforting. Maps don't judge people. This one does. That sounds like something people say before the floor collapses. Sometimes the floor does collapse. Rowan stared at him. Mael smiled. Only if you choose badly. That was somehow worse. Before dusk, Mael prepared a bundle for the journey. Dried fish, a coil of cord, a small oil flask, and a reed whistle. What is the whistle for? Calling help? Will help come? No. Rowan waited. Mael tucked IT into the bundle, but it may frighten birds. Marvelous. They left the hidden archive as evening light softened the hills. Mael sealed the entrance again with practiced hands. From the ridge, Rowan looked back at the path by which he had come. Far off near the lower slopes, two dark figures moved among the stones. The riders, still following. Mael saw them too. His expression did not change. We leave before moonrise. Through the marshes? Through the marshes. Rowan tightened his grip on the satchel. Ahead waited drowned roads, hidden causeways, and clues older than memory. Behind came men who wanted the map, and somewhere beyond both, if the old stories were true, the lost kingdom of Auril continued to wait. They left the tower behind as the moon rose thin and pale above the hills. Mael walked ahead without a lantern. This seemed unwise. Rowan followed, with one hand on his staff and the other near his satchel, trying not to imagine how many holes, roots, stones, and ancient inconveniences waited in the dark. The old keeper moved as if the land whispered directions into his boots. Rowan moved as if the land had personal complaints against him. By midnight, the hills softened into low country. The ground grew wetter. Reeds appeared beside the path, first in small clumps, then in thick ranks that hissed softly whenever the wind passed through them. The marshes began without ceremony. Nitrogen monoxide gate. No warning sign. Nitrogen monoxide. Cheerful guard saying, "Welcome, traveler. Please surrender your dry socks." Just mud, water, fog, and the smell of rotting plants. Mael stopped at the edge of a black pool. From here, step only where I step. That sounds important. IT is wonderful. I love important things whispered beside suspicious water. They continued. The path became a narrow causeway, barely raised above the marsh. In places, IT vanished beneath shallow water. Mael tested each step with his staff before moving. Rowan copied him carefully. Mist gathered around them. Soon the hills behind disappeared. The world shrank to reeds, water and the steady tap of Mael's staff. Somewhere nearby, frogs called an uneven rhythm, like tiny monks chanting, after forgetting the words. A bird cried once overhead. Then silence returned. Rowan had traveled through forests, fields, crowded fairs, and mountain passes, but the marsh felt different from all of them. IT did not block the path. IT confused IT. Every direction looked almost passable. Every patch of grass seemed solid until touched. Every pool reflected enough moonlight to resemble a road. After perhaps an hour, Mael lifted one hand. Rowan froze. Ahead, the causeway divided. 3 narrow lines crossed the water, each disappearing into fog. Mael held out, his palm for the map. Rowan passed IT over. The old keeper unrolled only a small section and studied the markings. The Huron's tooth should stand before dawn. Should. Marshes move. Stones move? No. Everything around them doze. That was not reassuring. A curious fact about medieval wetlands is that many hidden roads across marshes were made from timber, brush, stone, or packed clay, and some could last astonishingly long beneath waterlogged ground. Wet mud, unpleasant as ITEZ, preserves things almost too well. Terrible for shoes. Excellent for archaeology. So, credit where due, Mael chose the leftmost path. They proceeded slowly. The fog thickened. At one point, Rowan looked down and saw the pale shape of an old wooden beam beneath the clear water. IT ran straight beneath the reeds, part of a submerged trackway older than any living memory. He imagined people crossing here centuries before. Merchants with carts, messengers carrying seals, children perhaps, complaining that the walk was long. Human nature, unlike roads, rarely changed. The thought comforted him, briefly. Then something splashed behind them. Rowan turned sharply. Ripples spread across a pool. Nothing else. Fish, he whispered. Perhaps. Do marsh fish wear boots? Mael did not answer. That was answer enough. They moved faster. Behind them came another sound. Soft, careful. A footstep on wet stone. The riders had entered the marsh. Rowan felt anger rise beneath his fear. Whoever these men were, they were determined, annoyingly determined. The sort of determination that would be admirable if directed toward baking bread or repairing bridges. Mael guided him off the visible causeway and into a stand of reeds. Water climbed over Rowan's ankles. Mud sucked at his boots. The old keeper crouched behind a fallen willow. Rowan crouched beside him. The riders had dismounted. Their dark shapes moved along the causeway. One was broad-shouldered, the other tall and narrow. They paused at the fork. The taller one knelt, examining the stones. Rowan silently cursed the mud on his boots. The man straightened and pointed down the path Mael and Rowan had taken. Mael leaned close to Rowan's ear. When I move, follow, quietly. Rowan nodded. Mael drew the reed whistle from his bundle. For one absurd instant, Rowan expected him to call imaginary help. Instead, the old keeper blew a sharp, trembling note. From the reeds nearby erupted a chaos of wings. Dozens of sleeping marsh birds burst upward, crying and flapping through the fog. The riders stumbled back. One swore loudly. A lantern dropped, hissed, and went dark in the water. Now, Mael whispered. They slipped away through the reeds. Rowan followed blindly, trusting the old man's steps. Water splashed softly around his legs, reeds brushed his face, mud pulled and released with greedy little noises. Behind them the riders shouted. Then came a heavier splash. Someone had stepped wrong. Rowan did not look back. Mail ellied him onto another hidden strip of stone. The ground steadied beneath them. They hurried until the voices faded behind fog and distance. At last Mail stopped beside a raised mound, covered in pale grass. Rowan bent over, hands on knees. I take back every unkind thing I thought about that whistle. You thought many? Several. Fair. And bent over, hands on knees. I take back every unkind thing I thought about that whistle. You thought many. Several. Fair. It rested only briefly. The moon slid behind clouds. Darkness deepened. Mail pointed ahead. There. First Rowan saw nothing. Then the fog shifted. A stone rose from the marsh, tall and narrow, leaning slightly over the water. Its tip curved, like a bird's beak, the Huron's tooth. They approached carefully. At its base, half hidden by moss, was a carving of a crescent moon. Rowan felt the map's sequence tighten around him like a thread. Hills, tower, crescent. The third mark. Mail traced the carving with 2 fingers. This is the boundary. Of Arl? Of what protected IT? The phrase made the marsh seem colder. Beyond the stone, the water changed. IT became darker, stiller. Even the frogs had quieted. Mail unrolled the map one last time before dawn. The crescent symbol marked. It turned eastward along a causeway that did not appear to exist. Yet when the first gray light touched the marsh, Rowan saw a faint line beneath the water. Flat stones, almost perfectly hidden. The old road continued. They crossed. As dawn spread silver across the wetlands, mist lifted in slow curtains. Behind them, somewhere far away, a man shouted once, then nothing. By morning, they reached firmer ground, a low island of black earth and twisted trees. Among the roots stood fragments of walls, smooth and pale beneath moss, ruins again. But these were different. At the center of the island lay a broken archway, half-sunken, carved with symbols Rowan had never seen. Mail studied them and grew very still. "What is IT?" Rowan asked. The old keeper touched the stone gently. "A warning. Can you read IT? Some?" And Mail looked toward the east, where the marsh steamed beneath the rising sun. "IT says the road ahead was sealed by royal command." Rowan waited. Mail's voice lowered. "And that those who opened IT did so, at the risk of waking what the kingdom chose to bury." Rowan stared at the quiet ruins. The map had brought them through the marshes, but the path ahead, nitrogen monoxide, longer felt like a road to discovery. IT felt like a road to something deliberately left sleeping. The warning on the broken arch stayed with Rowan as they left the marsh island. Behind, those who opened IT did so at the risk of waking what the kingdom chose to bury. Ancient people had a talent for making simple directions sound like threats. Mail sighed little during the morning. He allied Rowan east over firmer ground where the marsh thinned into wet meadows. The sky cleared slowly, revealing a pale blue washed clean by night mist. Their boots left dark prints through silver grass. Rowan wanted answers. Mail looked like a man carrying too many of them. Eventually, the old keeper stopped beside a stream and filled his water flask. What did the warning mean? Rowan asked. Mail capped the flask. Exactly what IT sighed. That is the least helpful answer possible. Not the least. I fear your imagination. Mail almost smiled. Then his face turned serious again. Arl sealed roads behind itself, not all at once, in stages, gates, stones, hidden doors, false paths, warnings. Mize sealed roads behind itself, not all at once, in stages, gates, stones, hiddens, smiled. Then his face turned serious again. Arl sealed roads behind itself, not all at once, in stages, gates, stoves, to keep people out, or to keep something in. Rowan did not enjoy that distinction. By midday they reached higher ground. The marsh fell behind them, glimmering under the sun like a sheet of broken mirror. Ahead stretched wild country, heather, scattered pines, gullies cut by rain, and ridges of stone rising from the earth. Near sunset, they saw the tower. IT stood alone on a rocky hill, taller than the ruin where Mayo had waited, but stranger. Nitrogen monoxide road, LE2 IT. No village surrounded IT. Nitrogen monoxide banner flew from its crown. IT rose from bare stone as if the hill had grown it in a bad mood. The tower was round, narrow, and almost perfectly intact except for its missing roof. Its walls were pale gray, marked by weather and black streaks from centuries of rain. There were nitrogen monoxide windows on the lower level. Only one door, set high above the ground, reached by a stair carved directly into the rock. Rowan looked at Mayo. That seems welcoming. It was not built to welcome, I gathered. They climbed the hill carefully. Wind tugged at their cloaks. Somewhere overhead, a hawk circled without concern for ancient mysteries, which seemed healthy. At the door, Mail examined the lintel. Nitrogen monoxide name was carved there. Nitrogen monoxide Lord's mark. Nitrogen monoxide saint. Only a blank stone panel where something had once been chiseled away. The tower without a name. Mail sighed. People call IT that? People who know IT exists. Small crowd then. Very. Inside, the tower smelled of dust, bird feathers, and old cold stone. Their footsteps echoed in the round chamber. Broken shelves lined the walls. A spiral stair climbed upward into shadow. Rowan expected emptiness. Instead, the walls were covered in writing. Not painted, carved. Thousands of tiny marks filled the stone from floor to ceiling in narrow bands. Mail lifted the lamp. His face tightened. Records. Rowan stepped closer. The script resembled the map, but sharper, more formal. Can you read them? Some? Enough? Mail's eyes moved across the lines, enough to be troubled. That was becoming his favorite amount. They climbed. Each level contained more writing. Some chambers held cracked tablets, stacked in niches. Others contained stone benches, bronze rods, and strange circular diagrams scratched into the floor. A curious oddity from medieval record-keeping. Not all archives were parchment and ink. Important information could be carved, painted, woven, knotted into cords, or marked on sticks. Paper burns, parchment rots, but stone sits there patiently, smug as a cat. On the third level, Rowan found a table made from a single slab of black stone. Across it lay a map carved directly into the surface. Haron, again, not as a symbol, as a realm. Mountains, rivers, roads, watch posts, cities, canals, and walls spread beneath a thin coat of dust. Rowan stared. IT was vast. far larger than any legend suggested. Mail brushed dust away from the central region. There, he whispered, a city carved in remarkable detail, set between 3 rivers, the capital, the heart of the lost kingdom. Rowan felt the breath leave him. So it was real. Yes, and this tower watched the roads? Mail shook his head. Nitrogen monoxide. This tower remembered them. At the top level, they found the chamber that changed everything. Its roof had fallen away, leaving the room open to the evening sky. Vines crept over the broken stones. Rain had worn many carvings smooth, but one wall remained sheltered beneath a leaning arch. Mail approached it slowly. The lines there were deeper than the others. A formal inscription. He read in silence for a long time. Rowan waited. Though patience did not come naturally to him, finally Mail spoke. This says the map was not made before Oral vanished. Rowan frowned. What? I, too, was made after. The wind moved through the open tower. Rowan looked down at the satchel. After the kingdom disappeared, after IT withdrew from the world, then who made it? Mail traced the inscription, the last cartographer. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. According to the record, when Oral sealed itself away, one royal cartographer was commanded to create a final map, not for kings, not for armies, not for treasure hunters with muddy boots and questionable instincts, for a future witness, someone who might one day find the path and decide whether the world deserved to remember Aura. Rowan swallowed. That seems like... That thought chilled him more than the wind. The inscription continued. Mail translated slowly. The last map was divided between visible marks and hidden paths. IT would mislead the greedy, delay the careless, and guide only those who followed signs without forcing doors too soon. Rowan remembered the valley, the marsh, the warning arch. The map had not simply shown the way. IT had tested him. Wonderful, he sighed softly, judged by parchment. Mail gave him a sideways glance. There are worse judges. I have met some. Then Mail stopped reading. His expression changed. What? The old keeper's voice lowered. The record says another map was made. Rowan stared. Another? Another? A false one. For WHOM? For those hunting Arl. The riders. Rowan understood before Mail said more. The men following them might not need his exact map. They might have clues of their own. Dangerous clues. Broken clues. A route designed to lure seekers into dead ends or worse. Toward sealed places never meant to open. From chamber. Another sound followed. A scrape. A footstep on the stair. Rowan's hand closed around his knife. Mail leaned close. The tower has another way down. Of course it does. Quiet. Quiet. They moved behind the broken arch. Mail pressed a stone carved with nitrogen monoxide symbol at all. A narrow panel opened in the wall, revealing a cramped stair descending through darkness. As they slipped inside, torchlight flickered below. A voice rose from the stairwell. Search every level. The map bearer came this way. Rowan entered the hidden passage. Mail pulled the panel shut behind them. Darkness closed around them once more, and now Rowan knew the map was not only guiding him toward a lost kingdom. IT was pulling him into the final argument of everyone who had ever tried to claim IT. The hidden stair was narrow enough to make Rowan question the generosity of ancient builders. He descended sideways, one hand against the wall, the other clutching his satchel. Mail moved below him in near silence. Behind them, muffled through stone, the voices of the pursuers echoed inside the tower. Search every level. That phrase followed Rowan downward like a cold finger on the back of his neck. The stair twisted sharply, then sharply again. Then, because apparently one twist was not enough, IT twisted a third time with the enthusiasm of a drunk snake. Rowan bumped his shoulder against the wall. He swallowed a complaint. Complaints made noise. Noise invited men with torches. And men with torches generally believed every problem could be solved by looking angry in firelight. At last the stair opened into a low passage. Beneath the hill, Mail lit the smallest flame possible, barely enough to reveal the ground. The tunnel smelled dry and old, different from the marsh roads and valley chambers. Here the air carried dust, iron, and something faintly bitter. "Where does this lead?" Rowan whispered. "A war road." That sounds cheerful. It was not. They moved quickly. The passage sloped downward, then widened into a buried corridor, reinforced by stone ribs. Along the walls, carvings appeared. Shields, spears, broken crowns, and lines of marching figures. Many had been deliberately scratched out. Rowan slowed. "These are battle scenes." Mail nodded. "The buried war, the one nobody remembers, because someone worked very hard to make IT forgotten." A curious thing about medieval memory is that losing a war was not always the only disaster. Sometimes remembering it was worse. Chronicles could vanish. Songs could be forbidden. Names could be scraped from stone. And suddenly a battlefield became only a meadow where sheep grazed with absolutely nitrogen monoxide respect for history. They reached a chamber shaped like a half-moon. IT's ceiling was low. Stone benches lined the walls. In the center stood a cracked pillar covered with writing. Mail approached it carefully. Rowan listened for pursuit. Distant sounds still came from behind them, but fainter now. The pursuers had not found the hidden stair. Not yet. Mail read. The pillar in silence. His face grew grave. This was a muster chamber, he sighed. Soldiers gathered here before moving through the tunnels. Arl's soldiers? Yes. Against whom? Mail hesitated. Then he brushed dust from a carved emblem near the pillar's base. IT showed a crowned wolf biting a sun. Rowan had seen many lordly symbols in his travels. Painted on shields and sewn onto banners, he did not recognize this one. The wolf crown, Mail sighed. A northern empire that nitrogen monoxide longer exists. Another lost kingdom? No. That one was destroyed. By Arl, in part? Rowan studied the scratched battle scenes, so Arl fought a war. More than a war. Mail looked toward the tunnel ahead. An invasion, a siege, a betrayal. The records differ, but the wound was deep enough that afterward Arl changed forever. They continued. The war road eddied under ridges and dry stream beds. At intervals, side passages branched away, some collapsed, some sealed by stone doors. Mail ignored them. Rowan noticed marks beside each sealed entrance. Warnings, names, dates perhaps. The hidden kingdom had built beneath itself a second world of roads, chambers, and locked memories. Eventually they reached a wider gallery. Here, broken weapons had been set into the walls, spearheads, arrow points, fragments of sword blades, all black with age. Not trophies, memorials. Rowan passed them quietly. He imagined hands that had held them. Men and women frightened, brave, foolish, exhausted. People who had wanted to live long enough to complain about supper again. That thought struck him harder than heroic songs ever had. At the far end of the gallery stood a carved mural. Unlike the scratched battle scenes, this one remained clear. It showed a city beneath 3 rivers, Arl's capital. Above, Ida marched an army carrying the wolf crown. Inside the city walls, figures gathered around a great door. No, not a door. A gate carved into a mountain. Lines radiated from it like sunlight or fire. Rowan leaned closer. "What is that?" Mail did not answer immediately. The old keeper seemed reluctant even to look at It. Some called It the Heart Gate. What did It do? That depends on which story survived. That is rarely a good sign. Mail sighed. Some said It protected Aurel. Some said It powered its hidden roads. Some said It held the wisdom of the first kings. Others said It was merely a symbol. And you? I think it was real. Rowan looked at the glowing lines carved around the gate. And dangerous. Anything powerful enough to be hidden becomes dangerous eventually. From somewhere behind them came a sharp echo, a shout, then another. Mail turned. They found the lower passage. How? Persistence, bad luck, or the false map? They hurried on. The corridor narrowed into rough-cut stone. Rowan's legs ached. His stomach complained. His shoulders felt as though his satchel had been filled with bricks instead of parchment. Behind them, pursuit grew clearer. Footsteps, voices, a torch glow flickering along the far wall. Mail led Rowan through a side opening half hidden behind fallen stone. They squeezed into a narrow cleft and waited. 3 men passed the opening. Not 2, 3. The broad rider, the tall rider, and a third man in a dark red cloak trimmed with black fur. He carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed and disappointed by everyone. In his hand was a rolled parchment, a map, the false map. Perhaps the red-cloaked man stopped near the mural. "Here," he said. His voice was calm, educated, and unpleasant. "The war record confirms It. The Heart Gate lies beyond the mountains." The tall rider asked, "And the map-bearer?" "He will lead US where the false route cannot." Rowan felt Mail stiffen beside him. The red-cloaked man continued. "Arl's heirs, hid like frightened children. But their vaults remain, their machines, their royal archives, their gold. Gold, of course. There It was, the eternal word that made sensible men stupid, and stupid men energetic. The broad rider grunted. "And if the old warnings are true?" The red-cloaked man laughed softly. "Warnings are written by people who wish to keep power for themselves." Rowan, listening in the cleft, decided this was exactly the sort of sentence spoken shortly before someone awakened. A terrible ancient inconvenience. The men moved on. When their light faded, Mail exhaled. "Lord Vare. You know him?" "By reputation. A collector of forbidden histories." "That sounds almost respectable." "He burns villages for manuscripts." "Less respectable." Mail's face was hard. "If he reaches Arl, he will not preserve It. He will strip It open." Rowan looked down at his satchel. The last map suddenly felt less like a discovery and more like a burden placed carefully into the wrong hands, meaning his hands, which had not volunteered, but he remembered the mural, the war, the scratched names, the hidden roads, and the abandoned settlement where even broken drains had waited patiently beneath grass. "No," Rowan sighed quietly. Mail looked at him. Nitrogen monoxide? We cannot let him reach IT first. The old keeper studied him for a moment, then nodded. The passage ahead sloped upward toward cold air. Beyond IT waited the mountains of mist, the next mark on the hidden route. Behind them came Lord Vere and his men, chasing gold through the bones of a war the world had chosen to forget. And Rowan finally understood that the lost kingdom had not vanished from weakness. IT had vanished because something terrible had once tried to take IT. And now that same hunger had found the road again. The war road climbed toward daylight. At first Rowan noticed only the change in air. IT grew colder, sharper, less dusty. Then came the scent of pine, snowmelt, and open stone. The tunnel's darkness thinned ahead, and soon a gray line appeared where the passage met the outer world. Mail raised one hand. They stopped before the exit. Beyond IT, where the passage met the outer world, Mail raised one hand. They stopped before the exit. Beyond IT, wind sighed across high ground. No voices followed immediately. Nitrogen monoxide torchlight flickered behind them. For the moment, Lord Vere and his men remained somewhere in the buried passages, probably admiring carvings threatening stones, or making speeches at walls. Men like that always seemed to enjoy hearing themselves echo. Mail leaned near the opening and looked out. After a while, he nodded. Clear. They stepped into the mountains. The world widened suddenly. Rowan found himself on a narrow ledge, overlooking a vast sweep of ridges and valleys. Behind him, the tunnel mouth hid beneath an overhang of dark rock. Ahead, mountains rose in layered walls, their peaks wrapped in pale mist that drifted slowly through the high passes. The Mountains of Mist, so named apparently because medieval people occasionally named things with refreshing honesty. Clouds moved low between the slopes. Pines clung to broken ground. Streams fell in silver, threads from unseen heights. Everything smelled clean, cold, and faintly dangerous. Rowan pulled his cloak tighter. Lovely place. IT kills the careless, Mail said. Also direct. The mountains prefer clarity. They followed a goat track along the ridge. The map remained tucked away while Mail guided them by landmarks. A split peak, shaped like a broken tooth, a black cliff streaked with quartz, a waterfall that vanished before reaching the valley floor, blown sideways by wind. A curious fact about medieval mountain travel is that many high routes were known only seasonally. A path safe in summer could become a death trap under snow, and a harmless mist could hide a cliff, a ravine, or a goat staring at you with deep personal disappointment. By afternoon, mist thickened around them. It did not arrive like fog from the lowlands. IT poured over the ridges in slow white rivers, swallowing pines from the top down. Soon Rowan could see nitrogen monoxide more than 10 paces ahead. Mail tied a cord between them. Rowan accepted this without mockery. Some situations deserved humility. The path narrowed. On one side rose a wall of wet stone. On the other dropped empty whiteness. Loose pebbles skittered beneath Rowan's boots and disappeared without sound. He did not look down again. How far? He asked. To what? Anything less horrifying. Mail's voice came through the mist. Far enough. That answer has aged poorly from the moment you spoke, IT. They moved slowly. The wind shifted without warning. opening gaps in the mist. Through one, Rowan glimpsed a valley far below, green and impossibly distant. Through another, he saw something built across a ridge ahead, a wall, not natural stone, built stone. IT appeared for only a heartbeat before mist swallowed IT again. Rowan stopped. I saw something. The first veil wall, Male sighed. Veil wall, old defenses of Aurel in the mountains? Especially in the mountains. They reached it near dusk. The wall stretched across the pass from cliff to cliff, broken in places but still imposing. Its stones were pale and fitted with the same precise craft Rowan had seen in the hidden roads. Nitrogen monoxide gate remained, only a narrow breach filled with fallen blocks. Carved above the breach was a symbol like an eye half covered by clouds. Male touched IT. Travelers once passed here only with permission. From whom? Watchers. Watchers. Like an eye half covered by clouds. Male touched IT. Travelers once passed here only with permission. From whom? Like an eye half covered by clouds. Rowan looked around at the empty ridges. Still here? Not living ones. Wonderful distinction. They camped in the lee of the wall without fire. Cold crept into Rowan's bones. He ate dried fish and hard bread while Male studied the map beneath a shielded lamp. The hidden pressure marks showed a route through 3 high passes, but the visible ink showed something different. A shorter path through a valley to the north. The false map likely points there, Male said. Is IT dangerous? Very? Then Lord Veer may take IT. Unless he realizes we do not. Rowan looked toward the misty dark. So we need to stay ahead. Yes. Sleep came in fragments. Wind moaned through gaps in the wall. Once Rowan woke convinced, he heard singing, a low tone carried through the pass, rising and falling like distant voices. He sat up. Male was awake too. Do you hear that? Wind in the hollow stones, that is all? Probably. Probably is not warm. Male pointed toward several round holes carved in the upper wall. The stones were shaped to sing in strong wind. A warning system, perhaps, or ceremony. Rowan lay back down. Imagine building a wall that hums at night. Imagine guarding IT alone. Rowan decided not to. Morning brought frost. Their cloaks were stiff, their fingers numb, and Rowan's mood had frozen into something brittle. They crossed, each crowned with a flat stone carved with the crescent symbol. Male smiled faintly. We are still on the true road. Rowan would have celebrated, but breathing had become his main occupation. Descending proved harder than climbing. The stones shifted. The mist confused distance. Several times Male stopped and listened before choosing a direction. Once he led them around what looked like a smooth slope, but was actually a snow-covered drop. Rowan stared at IT. That would have been embarrassing. Briefly. Your comfort is astonishing. By late afternoon, the weather turned. Wind rose from the west, driving mist into rain. Rain became sleet. The path vanished beneath wet gray stone. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, came a horn blast. Not wind, not stone. A horn. Lord Veer had reached the mountains. Male's expression darkened. He has men ahead. How? The false route crosses ours near the 3rd pass. Of course IT does. The 3rd pass lay between 2 cliffs shaped like open jaws. Snow drifted in pockets along the ground. At its center, stood a ruined watch post, half collapsed, its doorway blocked by ice. As they approached, a figure emerged from behind the stones. Then another. Veyer's riders. The broad one held a drawn sword. The tall one carried a crossbow. Rowan and Mael stopped. Mist rolled between them in pale bands. The tall rider smiled. The Lord wants the map. Rowan sighed. People keep wanting IT. Nobody asks how the map feels. The broad rider stepped forward. Mael whispered, "When the wind rises, move left. W-A-T." The humming began again, low at first, then louder. The ruined watch post, like the Vale wall, was carved with hidden channels. Wind rushed through them, filling the pass with a deep, vibrating note that seemed to come from the mountain itself. The horses below whinnied in alarm. The tall rider glanced aside. Mael threw a handful of loose grit into the air. The wind hurled IT into the riders' faces. Left, he snapped. Rowan moved. They scrambled across a narrow shelf hidden beside the cliff. The crossbow bolt, the riders' shouts. At the bottom of the pass, the land opened into a high bowl surrounded by cliffs. At its far side stood a vertical wall of stone, smooth and immense. Carved into IT was a door, not built, carved. A door-shaped outline cut directly into the mountain. Above IT gleamed faint beneath ice and lichen, the crown symbol of Arl. Rowan stopped, breathless. The next secret waited before them. The door carved into stone. The stone door stood silent beneath the cliffs. For a while, Rowan could only stare. The mountain wall rose so high that mist swallowed its upper reaches. Water slid down the rock in thin, shining lines, gathering around the carved outline of the door before freezing into cloudy ribbons near the base. IT was enormous, not castle gate. Enormous, not cathedral door enormous. Older than both, stranger than both. The outline had been cut directly into the cliff, tall enough for a loaded wagon to pass through, and wide enough for 3 riders abreast. Nitrogen monoxide hinges showed. Nitrogen monoxide handles. Nitrogen monoxide ironwork. Only stone-shaped, so precisely that the door seemed both present and impossible. Above IT, the crowned mark of Arl had survived beneath lichen, faded, cold, still watching. Rowan drew a slow breath. Please tell me this one opens from the outside. Mael approached the door carefully. IT opens for those who understand why IT was closed. That sounds like a no. IT is more of a warning. I miss doors with latches. Behind them, from somewhere high in the pass, came distant shouts. Veyer's men had not given up. Of course they had not. Determination in villains was like damp in boots. Persistent, unpleasant, and somehow always worse by evening. Mael unrolled the map and held it near the stone. The parchment shivered in the wind. Rowan shielded the lamp while the old keeper studied the hidden pressure lines. The map gives nitrogen monoxide direct mark, Mael said. Helpful. IT gives a sequence. He pointed. 3 tiny symbols had been pressed into the parchment near the mountain gate. A closed eye, a broken spear, and a falling star. Rowan looked from the map to the door. Any chance that means knock politely? Nitrogen monoxide. Shame. They searched the cliff face. Snow crunched beneath their boots. Sleet ticked softly against stone. The cold made Rowan's fingers clumsy, but he forced himself to work carefully. Near the left side of the door, he found the closed eye. IT was carved low, almost hidden beneath ice. Male cleared IT with H-ice knife. A narrow groove ran from the eye toward the center of the door. On the right side, reachable only after Roan climbed onto a ledge and almost sacrificed his dignity to gravity. They found the falling star. Each symbol had a shallow hollow beneath IT. 3 marks. Roan sighed. 3 hollows. Keys, Male murmured. Roan stared at him. You have keys? Nitrogen monoxide. Naturally, they examined the hollows more closely. Each was shaped differently. The one beneath the eye was round. Beneath the spear, long and narrow. Beneath the star, triangular. Roan remembered the ruined places they had passed. The Valley Stone, the Tower Archive, the Heron's Tooth, the War Gallery. Every stage had left him with more than memories. He opened his satchel. Inside lay the bronze leaf pin he had almost left behind, but had taken from the abandoned settlement because curiosity had defeated morality by a narrow margin. Also Male's reed whistle and a small black shard from the war road, a broken piece of old spearhead he had picked up without quite thinking. Rowan held up the spearhead. Male looked at IT. You took that? I was emotionally supervised by nitrogen monoxide 1. It may serve. The spearhead fit the narrow hollow beneath the broken spear. A soft click sounded within the stone. They both froze. Nothing terrible happened. That was encouraging. The reed whistle, when turned, fit the round hollow beneath the closed eye. Another click. Rowan blinked. The whistle was a key? Male looked faintly embarrassed. I suspected. You suspected and gave it to me as a bird frightener? I did frighten birds. Fair. For the falling star they had no obvious piece. The triangular hollow waited. Wind moaned down the cliffs. Behind them, voices drew closer. Male searched his bundle. Nothing. Rowan searched his satchel again. Red crumbs, cord, flint, the map. Then he noticed the map's blue cord. Its knot was held by a small triangular bead, dull gray beneath dirt. He had assumed IT was bone. Male took IT, rubbed IT clean, and revealed a faint silver surface etched with a star. The cartographer's seal, he whispered. Rowan carefully pressed it into the hollow beneath the falling star. The third click sounded. The mountain answered. Deep within the cliff, stone shifted against stone. The door did not swing. IT sank. Slowly, massively, silently at first, then with a grinding roar that shook snow from ledges above. The carved slab descended into the earth, revealing darkness beyond. Cold air breathed outward. IT smelled ancient, dry, deep. Rowan stepped back. The opening was not merely a tunnel. IT was a road descending beneath the mountain, lined with pale pillars carved like tree trunks. Along the ceiling, crystals caught the faint daylight and carried IT inward as a dim blue glow. A curious little fact. Some medieval builders placed polished metal, pale stone, or crystals near openings to carry light farther into dark spaces. IT was not magic, just cleverness, which is often more impressive and usually has fewer priests complaining about IT. Male stared into the passage. The sealed road. Rowan swallowed. And what did we just wake? Before Male could answer, a voice rang across the bowl. Beautiful. Lord Via emerged from the mist above the path. red cloaks snapping in the wind. His 2 riders flanked him, and behind them came 4 more armed men Rowan had not seen before. Vayer looked delighted. Not surprised, delighted. "Master Rowan," he called, as though greeting a guest at dinner. "You have my thanks." Rowan muttered, "I hate being useful to the wrong people." Mail stepped beside him. Vayer descended slowly, careful on the slick stones. "Do not be foolish," he sighed. "You have opened what neither kings nor scholars could find. Walk with me, and you may witness history." "I have witnessed enough of your history," Mail replied. "It smells of smoke." Vayer smiled. Keeper Mail, still guarding doors after all these years, still watching thieves call themselves historians. The smile thinned. The riders raised weapons. Rowan's thoughts raced. The door was open. The passage beyond waited. They could not fight. 7 armed men. They could not close the gate, not quickly. Mail leaned close. "When I say run, enter the road." Another excellent plan with missing parts. Trust the map. I barely trust my boots. Vayer lifted one hand. "Take them." At that moment, the mountain groaned again. Not from the door, from above. Snow loosened on the cliffs, shaken by the ancient mechanism. A slab of ice cracked with a sound like breaking pottery. Mail shouted, "Run." Rowan ran. He plunged through the open gate beside Mail as snow and stone crashed behind them. The roar filled the world. Vayer's men shouted. Horses screamed. Somewhere beyond the mist, Rowan did not look back until they had passed between the first pillars. The entrance remained open, but a curtain of fallen snow and rubble now blocked most of the bowl outside. Not sealed. Delayed. Blue light shimmered ahead along the underground road. Behind, Lord Vayer still lived. Rowan knew it. Men like that did not vanish beneath one polite avalanche. But for the moment, the mountain had given them a lead. Before them stretched the road beneath the sleeping earth, descending toward whatever Arl had hidden from every hungry hand in the world. The underground road descended gently beneath the mountain. At first, Rowan ran because Mail ran. Then he ran because the echoes behind him suggested that somewhere beyond the fallen snow and broken stone, Lord Vayer was still very much alive and probably composing an elegant complaint about inconvenience. After several hundred paces, Mail slowed. Rowan stopped beside him, bent forward, and breathed as quietly as possible. The road stretched ahead in dim blue light. Pale pillars lined both sides, each carved like a tree trunk rising into branches that joined across the ceiling. Crystals set among. The stone leaves caught whatever light entered from behind and carried it onward in soft glimmers. It felt less like a tunnel and more like a forest remembered by stone. Rowan touched one pillar. The surface was smooth and cold. These people really disliked plain walls, he whispered. They believed roads should remind travelers where they had come from. Mail sighed. Mine mostly remind me that my feet hurt. Mail gave him a tired look. They continued. The air grew warmer as they descended. Water ran in channels beside the road, clear and slow. Strange little bronze grates covered drains at regular intervals. Even after centuries, the passage remained dry. Arl, Rowan thought, had not simply built hidden roads. It had maintained them with terrifying competence. After a while, the road opened into a vast cavern. Rowan stopped. His breath caught. The cavern ceiling arched far above. lost in darkness except where crystals gleamed like captured stars. Below Lay, a silent underground settlement built along terraces carved into the stone. Houses, workshops, stairways, bridges, water wheels, all still, all abandoned, yet astonishingly preserved. The buildings had pale walls and dark wooden beams hardened by age. Bronze lamps hung over streets where nitrogen monoxide feet had passed in generations. A canal ran through the center, its water black and glassy. It was as if a town had gone to sleep and politely refused to rot. A curious fact about dry caves and sealed spaces is that they can preserve wood, cloth, leather, and even food remains far longer than open air. Time is still hungry, of course, but underground it chews more slowly, like an old man with tough bread. Rowan stepped onto the main terrace. Dust lay thin across the paving, not thick. That seemed odd. Why isn't there more dust? Air still moves, Mail sighed. The vents must remain open. After all this time, Aro planned for long silence. They passed an empty stable where stone troughs still stood in neat rows. Nearby, shelves held clay jars sealed with wax. Mail warned Rowan not to open them. Could be grain, Rowan sighed. Could be poison. Grain is less exciting. Exciting is not always useful. Fair, enough. They crossed a bridge over the canal. Beneath the water, Rowan saw pale shapes. Not bones, but carved stones laid in patterns along the channel floor. Spirals, lines guiding the flow. Even water here had instructions. Beyond the canal stood a hall supported by square pillars. Its doors had fallen inward. Inside were rows of benches facing a raised platform. A school, perhaps. A council chamber. On the wall, painted figures remained visible in faded reds and blues. They showed people holding tools, books, baskets, and musical instruments. Not kings, not warriors, common people preserved in pigment. Rowan felt something quiet settle inside him. All his life, old stories had spoken of kingdoms through crowns and battles. But here, beneath the earth, Arel remembered bakers, scribes, children, builders, gardeners, and probably at least one very annoyed tax collector. History had made them a myth. Stone had kept them human. Mail examined. THE platform. There are records here. He found a bronze tube hidden beneath a loose tile. Inside lay thin sheets of hammered metal engraved with tiny script. Mail read, only a portion before growing still. What does IT say? Rowan asked. This town was called Lethran Gate. A way station? A refuge? The word changed the room. Mail read more. During the Buried War, people from outer settlements had been brought beneath the mountains through sealed roads. Not soldiers first. Families, artisans, healers, farmers, those. Not soldiers first. Families, artisans, healers, farmers, those artists. Who could preserve a civilization if the surface fell? Rowan looked around. The hall again. This had not been merely a secret road. IT had been an arc of stone. Then he noticed small objects left on one bench. A wooden doll, a slate tablet, a tiny shoe hardened by time. He looked away. Nitrogen monoxide gore. Nitrogen monoxide drama. Just absence. Some silences sighed more than screams ever could. They left the hall and followed. The canal deeper into the cavern. The road continued beyond the settlement through an arched, Inside stood a mechanism of interlocking wheels and chains, all bronze and black iron. IT connected to the water channels and a vertical shaft disappearing upward. Rowan leaned in. What is IT? Ventilation. Water lifts air through shafts. That is possible? IT is here. Rowan stared. You know, for a lost kingdom, they were very busy being clever. YES. No wonder people want their secrets. Mayle's face darkened. That is exactly the danger. A shout echoed faintly from behind. Both men turned, distant, but real. Lord Vere had entered the sealed road. Rowan cursed under his breath, without using any proper curse which made it sound like he was insulting soup. Mayle grabbed his arm. We move. They hurried through the crowned arch. The next passage descended more steeply. The blue crystal light faded behind them, replaced by a warmer glow from minerals in the walls. The road beneath their feet changed from gray stone to black paving, veined with gold-colored lines. Not gold. Probably not. Rowan refused to check. Curiosity had already caused enough problems. After a long descent, the passage opened into a chamber filled with statues. Rows of them, hundreds. Each statue depicted a person standing with one hand over the heart and the other holding a lamp. Kings stood beside farmers, soldiers beside children, elders beside musicians. Nitrogen monoxide statue was taller than another. At the chamber's center lay. Mayle looked toward the far wall. There, carved above another doorway, was a phrase. He translated slowly. All who pass beneath the sleeping earth carry the memory of those who chose silence. Rowan felt the map against his side. For the first time, IT did not feel like a treasure map. IT felt like a promise he had not understood when he accepted IT. Behind them, faint but closer, came voices. Vere was coming. Rowan and Mayle crossed the chamber between the silent statues. At the far doorway, Rowan looked back once. The stone faces watched without judgment. Or perhaps with all the judgment in the world. Then he stepped onward deeper beneath the sleeping earth, toward the hidden heart of Arl. Beyond the chamber of witnesses, the road narrowed. Rowan felt the change at once. The earlier passages had seemed built for travel, wide enough for carts, steady beneath tired feet, marked by drains and lamps and all the small mercies of thoughtful builders. This passage was different. IT was ceremonial. The black paving shone faintly beneath the warm mineral glow. The walls curved inward overhead, forming a long arch carved with vines, stars, rivers, open hands, closed EYES, and crowns so small that Rowan wondered how many patient stonecutters had quietly lost their tempers making them. Mayle walked slowly now, not from age, from reverence. Rowan matched his pace. Behind them, Vere's distant voices had faded for the moment. Either the Lord had lost time among the underground roads, or he was wisely checking every ancient mechanism before stepping on IT. No, that seemed unlikely. Men like Vere generally trusted destiny, right up until destiny dropped masonry on them. The passage began to rise, at first gently, then more steeply. Rowan's legs complained with great sincerity. After what felt like an entire afternoon spent inside a staircase, the tunnel opened into pale light, not daylight. Something softer, silver, green, gold. Green, gold. The tunnel opened into pale light, not daylight. Something softer, silver. Rowan stepped out and forgot how to speak. Before him stretched a hidden valley beneath the mountain's crown, enclosed by cliffs sulfur monoxide high. Their tops vanished into mist. Far above, cracks in the stone ceiling admitted filtered sunlight that fell in long, slanting beams. Waterfalls poured from unseen heights, feeding 3 rivers that curved around a vast city built on terraces of white stone. Arl, not a ruin, not entirely. The capital still stood. Towers rose slender as candles. Bridges crossed the rivers in graceful arcs. Domes shone beneath moss and lichen. Gardens, wild now but still arranged in ancient patterns, spilled green over walls and rooftops. Birds nested in royal balconies. Trees grew from courtyards. Vines wrapped columns where banners must once have hung. The city had not died violently. IT had been left carefully, like a lamp covered before sleep. Rowan whispered, "Oh, IT was not clever, but some sights do not leave room for cleverness." Mael's eyes shone. The heart of the lost kingdom. They stood on a high road overlooking the city. Below, avenues radiated from a central plaza where a great circular structure rose beside the meeting of 3 rivers, the Heart Gate. Even from this distance, Rowan recognized IT from the mural, a monumental arch carved into the base of the inner cliff, framed by pillars and a ring of dark stone. IT did not glow. IT did not hum. IT simply waited, which somehow felt worse. A curious little fact about abandoned cities is that silence is rarely complete. Wind, water, birds, insects, shifting stone, and leaves all keep talking. What disappears is human interruption. Nitrogen monoxide wheels, nitrogen monoxide bells. No arguing about the price of onions. Honestly, the onions may have enjoyed the peace. They descended toward the city. The outer gate stood open. Its bronze doors had turned green with age, but remained upright. Above them, carved words welcomed citizens home. Mael translated softly, "Enter with clean hands and a guarded tongue." Rowan glanced at his muddy fingers. I may already be in trouble. Inside, Arl unfolded around them. Streets paved with pale stone curved around garden courts. Channels carried clear water beside walkways. Houses rose 3 or 4 stories high, their balconies screened by carved lattice. Public fountains stood dry in some squares and still flowing in others, fed by mountain springs that had never received news of the kingdom's disappearance. Rowan passed a market street. Stone stalls remained in orderly rows. Weights lay beside scales. A painted sign showed a fish. Another showed boots. One showed what might have been bread, though after centuries of fading, IT could also have been an angry cloud. There were nitrogen monoxide bodies, nitrogen monoxide signs of slaughter, nitrogen monoxide frantic abandonment. Doors were closed, shutters latched, tools stored. IT looked as if the entire city had cleaned up. Where did they go? HE asked. Mael did not answer. Perhaps he did not know. Perhaps he feared he did. They reached a library near the central plaza. Its roof had partly collapsed, but many inner chambers survived. Shelves of stone held sealed bronze boxes. On a wall near the entrance, painted constellations circled the golden crown. Mael stood trembling before them. Records nitrogen monoxide keeper has seen. Rowan gently touched his sleeve. Later. The old man nodded with visible effort. The map pulled pulled them onward. At the plaza, the scale of Arl became almost overwhelming. Roads from every district converged there. Statues encircled the open space, not of kings alone, but of lawgivers, builders, healers, astronomers, poets, and one very serious-looking woman holding a chicken. Rowan stared. Important chicken? Bale followed his gaze. Possibly a symbol of vigilance, or breakfast. Also important. At the center of the plaza lay a circular mosaic showing the kingdom as 3 rings, outer roads, mountain refuge, hidden heart. Rowan realized the map in his satchel was only a small echo of this grand design. Arl had hidden itself not with one trick, but with layers of intention. At the far side stood the Heart Gate. Up close, IT was immense. The arch rose from the cliff. Its surface, covered in writing so fine IT resembled woven cloth. In the center stood a sealed doorway of dark stone veined with silver. Before IT rested a stone table. On the table lay a depression shaped exactly like the map. Rowan did not move. Mail looked at him. The final mark? Rowan slowly removed the parchment. His hands felt strangely calm. He placed the map into the carved hollow. IT fit perfectly. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the silver lines in the gate brightened, not blazing, just waking. Soft light traced the carved script, spreading from word to word, ring to ring, until the entire arch shimmered like moonlit water. The city answered. Far above, hidden channels opened. Water began to flow through dry fountains. Bells somewhere deep within the towers gave one low, trembling note. Arl had not forgotten how to breathe. Behind them, applause echoed across the plaza, slow, mocking. Lord Vare stepped from the avenue with his men behind him, cloak torn, face dirty, eyes bright with triumph. Magnificent, he sighed. Rowan sighed. Must you arrive at every important moment? Vare smiled. Only the useful ones. His gaze moved to the glowing gate. At last, the heart of Arl. Mail stepped forward. You do not understand what stands before you. No, Vare sighed softly. I understand perfectly. Power hidden is power wasted. The silver light grew brighter around the sealed door. Rowan looked at the map resting in stone. He understood now. The journey had not ended with finding the city. The true test had only begun. Lord Vare crossed the plaza as though Oral had been waiting all these centuries specifically for him. That was impressive confidence, also deeply irritating. His men spread behind him, with weapons drawn, though even they seemed unsettled by the glowing heart gate. Silver light moved across their faces. The ancient city around them murmured softly with returning water. You think this is treasure, the old keeper said. I think treasure wears many shapes. Vare's gaze never left the gate. Gold is useful. Archives are better. But what Arl hid here may change the balance of every throne in the north. Rowan frowned. What do you think IT is? Vare smiled. Knowledge. That should have sounded noble. Somehow from his mouth, it sounded like a knife being polished. The silver lines on the gate continued to brighten. A low vibration passed through the stone beneath Rowan's boots. Across the plaza, fountains stirred, formed slowly in the old script of Arl. Mail read them, his voice trembling. When memory returns, let witness speak. The plaza fell silent. Even Vare stopped smiling. The map on the stone table shifted. A seam opened beneath IT. and from within the table rose a bronze cylinder, sealed with blue wax, the same blue as the cord that had once bound the map. Mael reached for IT. Veyer's rider lifted a crossbow. Carefully, Veyer said. Rowan picked up the cylinder instead. No need for everybody to wave sharp things. He broke the ancient wax. Inside lay thin sheets of silvered metal, covered in tiny writing. Mael took them gently and began to read. At first his expression showed concentration, then sorrow, then something deeper, recognition perhaps. What does IT say? Rowan asked. Mael looked toward the empty city. The truth. The record had been left by the last council of Auril. Not a king alone, not a fearful priesthood, a council of rulers, engineers, healers, scholars, farmers, soldiers, and city speakers. In its final years, Auril had faced the Wolf Crown invasion, yes, but the war itself had not destroyed the kingdom. Auril had won, barely, at a terrible cost. The invaders had not come only for land or gold. They had come for the Heart Gate, believing it could command the hidden roads, waterworks, archives, and mountain defenses of Auril. Whoever controlled IT could move armies unseen, shelter whole populations, and turn mountains into fortresses, powerful enough for protection, powerful enough for tyranny. A curious truth about medieval politics is that the same road that brings grain to a hungry town can also bring soldiers to its gate. Tools do not stay innocent simply because their makers had good intentions. Even a bridge can become a threat if the wrong person controls both ends. Mael continued reading. After the war, Auril's leaders realized something dreadful. The kingdom had survived not because IT was hidden, but because IT had been coveted. Its knowledge had become a beacon. Every king, conqueror, and desperate lord who heard even a rumor of its abilities would come seeking the Heart Gate. Again, and again, and again. Nitrogen monoxide wall would be enough forever. Nitrogen monoxide army could remain pure forever. Nitrogen monoxide secret could survive if pride demanded witnesses. So Auril made a choice. IT would remove itself from the known world, not vanish in panic, withdraw by design. Outer settlements were emptied. Roads were buried. Records beyond the borders were bought, stolen, or quietly altered. Songs became legends. Rowan almost laughed at the strange sadness of IT. There they were, standing inside proof that the impossible had been real all along. And the truth was not a curse, not a dragon, not some jeweled monster under a mountain. IT was caution, painful, disciplined caution. Veyer's face hardened as Mael translated. They abandoned greatness, he sighed. Mael looked at him. They protected IT. They wasted IT. They survived. Veyer stepped closer. Where did they go? Mael read the final sheet. His voice soft. They remained. Rowan looked around. The empty balconies, the still windows, the closed doors. What does that mean? Mael's eyes lifted to the cliffs above the city. Not all lived here at the end. Some passed deeper through the inner ways. Some became keepers. Some joined neighboring lands under other names. They scattered themselves so Auril could not be seized as one prize. Rowan understood slowly. The kingdom had not died. IT had dissolved into the world. Families carrying fragments of memory. Keepers guarding roads. Villagers preserving stories. Old men like Edric. old guides like Mail, perhaps countless others, who nitrogen monoxide longer even knew what their ancestors had protected. Veyr looked disgusted. A coward's ending. Rowan turned to him. Nitrogen monoxide, a difficult one. The Lord's eyes narrowed. Rowan surprised himself by continuing. They gave up being remembered, so nitrogen monoxide won, like you could use them. Veyr laughed once. Like me? Rowan gestured around the plaza. You followed, threatened, and nearly got buried under a mountain for something you did not understand. Understanding comes after possession. That is an awful motto. It is the motto of history. No, Mail sighed. IT is the motto of conquest. The heart gate glowed brighter. Another line appeared on the door. Mail read it aloud. The witness shall choose what memory may bear. Rowan felt every eye turned toward him. Of course, because apparently the ancient map had decided that a tired courier with sore feet and a habit of speaking to birds was the ideal judge of lost civilization. Why me? He whispered. Mail answered quietly. Because you carried the map without selling IT, you entered without breaking. What barred you? You looked at Arl and saw people before treasure. Rowan was not sure that made him worthy. IT only made him less terrible than Lord Veyr, which seemed like a very low bridge to cross. Veyr raised his hand. His men advanced. Enough ceremony, he sighed. Take the records. Take the map. Open the gate. The silver light pulsed once. The city seemed to hold its breath. Rowan looked at the ancient sheets. The truth of Arl's disappearance lay in his hands. Not gold, not weapons, something more dangerous. A story that could wake every greedy kingdom in the world. And now he had to decide what to do with it. Rowan had never considered himself important. USEFUL. Perhaps reliable on good days, decent at finding roads, avoiding debts, and making bread last longer than bread wished to last. But important? No, important people had seals, titles, banners, and servants, who carried cushions so their noble backsides never suffered direct contact with furniture. Rowan had a satchel, sore knees, and a growing suspicion that ancient civilizations had terrible judgment when selecting witnesses. Yet there he stood in the heart of Arl, holding the final record of a kingdom that had erased itself from memory. Lord Veyr's men advanced. Mail stepped in front of Rowan. Brave, foolish, very Mail. The heart gate pulsed with silver light. Water ran through channels around the plaza, circling the stone table and 3 clear streams. Rowan noticed then that the channels formed the same pattern as the map. Outer road, hidden refuge, inner heart. The city was not merely waking. IT was listening. Veyr pointed his sword toward Rowan. Give me the record. Rowan held the silver sheets closer. I don't think it likes you. The record, the city. One of Vio's men hesitated. Good. A little theatrical nonsense could be useful when everyone already felt nervous. Medieval. Men were brave about swords and wolves, but mysterious glowing architecture tended to disturb even the confident ones. Honestly, fair. Veyr's expression sharpened. You mistake old mechanisms for judgment. Maybe. Rowan glanced at the water channels. Or maybe judgment sometimes uses plumbing. Mail made a tiny sound that might have been approval or exhaustion. Veyr lunged forward. At that exact moment, Rowan did the only thing he could think to do. He lifted the map from the stone table. The heart gate dimmed. The water channels slowed. the silver lines across. The arch flickered like candle flame in wind. Everyone froze. Rowan looked at the map, then at Vare, then at the gate. The choice became suddenly clear. Not easy. Clear. If he opened the gate fully, Vare might seize whatever lay beyond. Archives, mechanisms, roads, secrets powerful enough to pull armies through mountains. If he destroyed the record, Aural's truth might vanish forever. If he revealed everything to the world, kings would come with banners and priests and accountants, which was honestly the most frightening combination of all. But there was a fourth path. Aural had not asked to be found. IT had asked to be understood. Rowan placed the map back into the hollow, but not flat. He turned IT, just slightly. The pressed marks nitrogen monoxide, longer aligned, with the carved grooves beneath. The gate responded at once. The silver light shifted from bright to deep blue. Male whispered, "What are you doing?" "Choosing badly, I hope." "That is not reassuring." The stone table opened wider. A second depression appeared beneath the first, shaped not like the map, but like the triangular cartographer's seal. Rowan still had it, the little silver bead from the map's cord. He placed IT into the hollow. The city gave one low note, not a bell, not wind, a tone from stone, water and hidden air. The plaza trembled. Vare shouted, "Stop him!" His men rushed forward. Then the statues around the plaza moved, not walking. Nothing so dramatic as stone soldiers suddenly deciding they had opinions. Instead, their bases shifted, and hidden barriers rose from the paving between the armed men and the gate. Smooth stone screens slid upward, forming a half circle around Rowan, Mail, and the table. Vare struck one with his sword. The blade rang uselessly. Rowan stared. That was unexpected. Mail looked at him. "You aligned the witness seal." "I guessed." "You guessed?" "You guessed?" IT was a heartfelt guess. A curious fact from medieval engineering. Many complex locks and gates used alignment rather than simple keys. Turn the wrong ring, lift the wrong latch, place pressure in the wrong order, and nothing opened or something opened that you immediately regretted. Ancient builders were basically saying, "Please read the instructions," then hiding the instructions in poetry. The heart gate's blue light flowed into the stone table. Words appeared across its surface. Mail read quickly. "The witness may preserve memory in 3 forms: reveal, conceal, or entrust." Entrust? Entrust? Entrust. Mail's eyes widened. To a keeper line, Rowan thought of Edric Mail, the scattered descendants of Aural, people who had guarded fragments without claiming crowns. Vare shouted from beyond the barrier, "You cannot bury this again." Think what men could build with such knowledge. Rowan looked at him through the blue-lit stone. "And what would you build first?" Vare said nothing. That was answer enough. Rowan picked up the silver records. He felt their weight. Light in the hand, heavy in the world. "I choose and trust," he sighed. The moment the words left him, the map warmed beneath his palm. The parchment's faded lines brightened one final time. Then the visible roads began to vanish, fading into blankness from the edges inward. The hidden pressure marks remained, but altered, rearranging into a different pattern. Mail leaned forward to see. "IT is making a keeper's copy," he whispered. The silver sheets softened, not melting but changing. Their writing flowed like ink across metal, dividing itself into smaller bands of script. Some words disappeared, others remained. The full secret of the heart gate vanished from the record. The story stayed, the warning stayed, the duty stayed. Arl was choosing what memory could bear. Vare screamed in rage. He ordered his men to climb the barriers. One tried. The stone surface tilted sharply, dropping him backward into a fountain with a splash that would have been funny in less historic circumstances. Actually, RT was still a little funny. Rowan allowed himself one brief smile. The map finished changing. The golden-crowned city faded until only a small blue star remained at its center. Mael bowed his head. The road is sealed from conquest, but not from memory. Nitrogen monoxide. The stone barriers lowered. Vare stood drenched in fury, though sadly not in fountain water himself. His sword pointed at Rojin. You have stolen greatness from the world. Rowan slipped the altered map into his satchel. Nitrogen monoxide. I kept IT from being stolen badly. Vere attacked. Mael moved first, striking the Lord's wrist with his staff. Rowan stepped in, not gracefully, not heroically, but effectively, ENOUGH, and shoved Vare backward. The Lord stumbled over the wet paving. His own men hesitated. The city gave another deep note. Across the plaza, the outer avenues began to close. Stone gates slid down from archways. Bridges lifted slightly from their locks. Arl was sealing itself again. Mael grabbed Rowan's sleeve. We must leave now. Through which road? The one it allows. Behind the heart gate, a side door opened in the cliff, narrow and dimly lit. Vare saw IT too. He lunged toward them, but the water channels surged suddenly, spilling across the paving in a fast silver sheet. Not enough to drown. Enough to knock boots from under pride. Very satisfying. Rowan and Mael ran through the side door as Arl closed behind them. The last thing Rowan saw was the hidden city glowing softly in its valley. Neither dead nor conquered. Its secret changed, its memory entrusted. Then stone slid shut. Darkness returned, and Rowan understood that some treasures were not meant to be owned. Some were meant to be carried carefully, quietly, and only by those willing to leave the gold behind. The side passage carried Rowan and Mael away from Arl in darkness. Behind them, stone sealed with a final deep breath. Nitrogen monoxide crash. Nitrogen monoxide thunder. Just a soft closing sound, like a book being shut by careful hands. For a while neither man spoke. The passage sloped upward through the mountain, narrow but smooth. Small blue stones glimmered along the walls, enough to guide their steps. Rowan kept one hand on the altered map inside his satchel. IT nitrogen monoxide longer felt heavy in the same way. Before, IT had pulled. Now IT rested. That was somehow stranger. Mael walked slowly beside him, leaning harder on his staff than before. His face looked pale in the dim light, but peaceful. You chose well, he said at last. I guessed well. Sometimes that is what choosing means. Rowan considered this. IT sounded wise, also suspiciously like something old people sighed. After surviving an event they had not fully planned, the tunnel climbed for what felt like miles. Once, they passed a narrow window cut into the rock. Through IT, Rowan glimpsed the hidden valley far below. Arl shone faintly under mist. Then the view vanished behind stone. He wondered whether anyone would ever see IT again. Not soon. He hoped, not with armies, not with greed dressed in scholarly robes. Eventually the tunnel opened onto a hillside beneath late afternoon light. They emerged among pines, far from the mountain door, far from the pass, and far from Lord Villa. Snow dusted the ground. The air smelled sharp and clean. Rowan stepped outside and nearly laughed. The ordinary world still existed. Wind, trees, clouds, birds making rude little noises from branches. After Arl, even a crow seemed comforting. Mail sat on a fallen log. Rowan joined him for several. It still ends with tired feet. Songs skip that part. They rush from glory to feast, ignoring blisters, hunger, wet socks, and the deeply spiritual question of whether one has any cheese left. Rowan did have cheese left, barely. He shared it with Mail. The old keeper accepted it as though receiving a royal gift. Where now? Rowan asked. Mail looked toward the lower valleys, back to those who remember. Edric? Yes, and others. Many others? Enough. Rowan removed the altered map. Its surface had changed completely. The old roads were gone. The crowned city had faded into a blue star. Around the edges, new symbols appeared: hands, eyes, water lines, and small marks Mail recognized as keeper signs. It cannot lead an army now, Mail sighed. But it can teach? Carefully. Rowan nodded. That word seemed important. Carefully. It was the opposite of Vair, the opposite of conquest, the opposite of tearing open every locked door because a man disliked being denied. They began descending before sunset. By dusk they reached a shepherd's shelter and slept beneath its rough roof. Rowan dreamed of silent streets, flowing fountains, and a woman holding a chicken with royal seriousness. He woke smiling. 3 days later, they reached Edric's village. The old villager saw them from the road and stood very still. He did not ask whether Arun was real. Perhaps he already knew from their faces. Inside his cottage, Rowan laid the altered map on the table. Edric touched the blue star with trembling fingers. So it chose again, he whispered. Mail nodded. The witness entrusted memory. Edric looked at Rowan, not with awe, thankfully. Rowan disliked awe. It made him feel as though he should stand straighter. Instead, Edric looked at him with gratitude. That was worse, but easier to bear. Over the following days, quiet messages were sent, not by royal road, not with seals, through ordinary people. A shepherd's grandson, a widow who sold herbs, a miller with a remarkable talent for pretending not to listen. Fragments of Arl began moving again, gently from keeper to keeper. Not enough to expose the city, enough to preserve the truth. Lord Vair never reached them. Rumors later claimed he returned from the mountains with half his men, a ruined cloak, and nitrogen monoxide prize. He told different stories depending on the audience. In one, he had been betrayed. In another, he had nearly discovered a lost empire before cowardly peasants interfered. In the best version, repeated by a baker with excellent timing, he had been defeated by plumbing. Rowan liked that one. Weeks passed. Autumn deepened. Rowan prepared to return to the road, because letters still needed carrying, villages still needed news, and someone had to ensure gossip traveled safely. Before he left, Mail gave him the reed whistle. Again, Rowan stared at IT. Is IT still a key? Nitrogen monoxide. Are you certain? Mostly. That is not a gift. That is a threat. Mail smiled. It may still frighten birds. Edric handed him a fresh bundle of food. This time the bread was softer, a great improvement in civilization. At the village edge, Rowan looked north. Beyond hills and mist, Aurel slept beneath its mountains, not dead, not lost, protected, remembered by those who knew that wonder did not need to be owned to remain wondrous. Rowan touched the satchel at his side. The map was nitrogen monoxide, longer inside. It belonged with the keepers now, but one small blue thread from its cord remained tied around his wrist. A reminder, not of treasure, not of fame, of restraint, of listening, of leaving some doors closed unless the opening serves more than hunger. Then Rowan turned south along the muddy road. His boots were damp again. His cloak was damp again. His mood, strangely, was not. A crow landed on a fence post and watched him pass. Rowan lifted the whistle. "Careful," he sighed. "I have powers." The crow blinked, unimpressed, naturally. Rowan laughed softly and continued down the road, carrying letters, rumors, and one secret shaped like a hidden star. And now the road grows quieter. The hills settle under evening mist, and the old stones cool beneath the gentle dark. Somewhere far away, water moves through channels no greedy hand can command. Somewhere beneath patient mountains, white towers stand in silence, wrapped in vines and soft silver light. Rowan walks on, smaller than legend and better for IT. His footsteps fade into the ordinary world, where fires are lit, bread is shared, shutters are closed, and travelers find their way by memory, kindness, and the faint glow of stories kept safe. Nothing needs to hurry now. The map has rested. The kingdom has breathed. The secret has found careful hands. So let the night gather slowly around thee, calm and distant and kind. And as the last thought of Aurel drifts away like lantern light beyond a hill, you may rest too, safe beneath your own quiet sky.